that ship sailed. Like neither of us is ever climbing V17. Like it's just
No, there's
not,
no way.
like it's just no chance. And so I don't know. That's just it's the interesting thing where I'm sort of like, yeah, I'm all for like try harder routes, go big, try hard. But at a certain point, you do have to face the reality that like there are certain things that neither of us will ever do. This is Climbing Gold.
I mean, it's interesting because like we've talked a little bit about some of the research that's been done in psychology and behavioral economics here of like the Dunning-Kruger and imposter syndrome and the fact that the oftentimes the most gifted people are the people that tend to underrate their own skills. And it'd be interesting, like on a level of like thinking about something that like that in your life and trusting that of being like, hey, like if I take a step back and say you look at your 8 8a.nu scorecard where right now you're number 4 in the world and number 1 in America. And if you were to sort of trust that this is a phenomenon that that researchers actually find, and like even though you don't see it, maybe you do fall into that category of somebody who has underestimated themselves like on a level. Like I'm sure you use so much other really awesome tactical execute, like things you can execute on all the time. And yet that's a hard thing to actually believe, even though there's science behind it, is that you may be like the quintessential example of it.
No, I'm actually going to come down on Jonathan's side on this because I'm, and as much as I'm like, Jonathan, you should try harder routes, you're like, why not try them, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, it's like there is an enormous gap between how strong you are, Jonathan, on the board versus like random kids. I mean, even like in the home garage, like Owen's friend Brian, like whatever, the random freaking kid who I've never heard of, don't know anything about, climbing
Mhm.
V13 on the board in like a session. And you're like, dude, that is like, I don't know. I was thinking about this the other day. I went running with a professional runner on the Black Diamond team, Joe Grant, who is awesome, and I went for a 2 hour run with him. And it struck me that running is an interesting sport, and that no matter how much you want to be good or try or whatever, on any given day, like effort is not going to help you. Basically, like he was so far beyond my level that like at any point he could have just run away from me casually and been like bye, and there like no amount of effort on my part could have kept me with him, like no matter
Yeah.
what. And it made me think about that in climbing because there is a sort of gulf between certain levels where I'm like, for me no amount of effort will get me up a V14 boulder problem because it's just way too beyond like what my fingers can do. And not to say that I couldn't maybe train for 2 years and like work toward it, and like if I devoted myself, I'm like, yeah, maybe one day I could conceivably climb by V14. I don't want to say that's like beyond me if I found a really soft one that was endurancey and whatever, like maybe it's possible with enough knee bars and who knows.
But you're
But
saying
the
like if you went to try Esperanza right now,
yeah,
there's
exactly.
nothing you could do. Yeah, I
Yeah,
totally get it.
like I
Yeah.
can't even interface with the holds. Like certain
Yeah.
V14s, like I wouldn't even be able to touch the crux holds. Like I can't hang them. I
Yeah.
can't pull my weight off the ground. And I'm sort of like there's a gulf there where you're like no amount of wishful thinking and like self-belief or positive self-talk will allow me to hang on these crimps. It's
Hmm.
like there's just no like my fingers aren't strong enough. And so I don't know. I'm sort of like, yeah, I mean, I think you should try harder routes. That said, there are certain things that are just beyond all of us where you're like, well, like I don't know, and
Hmm.
that might be a product of climbing having grown so much, over our lifetimes. Because I feel like 15 years ago, like when we were sort of starting, you're like, the climbing world feels a little smaller, like everything was a little bit more in touch. Where you're like, oh, the hardest grade in the world is V14. I'm like, yeah, I could imagine that one day, maybe. But now I'm like V17. No, like we're not imagining that. That's like that ship sailed. Like neither of us is ever climbing V17. Like it's just
No, there's
not.
no way.
Like it's just no chance. And so I don't know. That's just it's the interesting thing where I'm sort of like, yeah, I'm all for like try harder routes, go big, try hard. But at a certain point, you do have to face the reality that like there are certain things that neither of us will ever do.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think like to come full circle on the whole conversation, I think that for me, um, I've been encouraged by the fact that I'm 38 years old and I actually do physically feel stronger than I was a couple years ago, which is really cool. Like, and I feel on an upward trajectory physically. Am I going to make an enormous breakthrough at 40 after pushing myself for 20 years? Probably not. Like I bet I can squeak another 5% out of my body, or 10% maximal. But am I going to jump in the same way that I did in my mid 20s? Like, no, like there's very little
proof of that being something that's possible. But, you know, maybe if it was possible, that'd be sweet. But so knowing that I'm probably within, let's say, 10% of like my physical maximum, I think for me, the main things to consider and the main like roadblocks to me potentially doing my absolute best physically are mental. And largely, I think that would be two things. One, am I willing to live in this space of feeling like an imposter for a while, right? Like, am I willing to go to a crag and try something that's clearly like just above me for a while and kind of deal with what that represents? And two, am I willing to, yeah, commit to that thing in a way where, you know, I could be 40 years old, you know, 2 years from now, and it's like my entire schedule for the whole year is based around like these 2 seasons that I'm trying this thing, that I'm like, you know, making sacrifices even more so potentially than I am already to climb. And how might that affect like my, like, you know, job? Like, how might that affect my relationship that I'm in, or the level of comfort that I live with day to day and stuff like that? So those are the things that I think I need to kind of go to, like, you know, go to war with, as opposed to like the physical aspect. Because like Alex said, I mean, I do feel like I can wring a little bit more out of my body and out of my abilities, but like, you know, barring some kind of like enormous scientific achievement in cell regeneration or something like that, like I, you know, I'm probably pretty close to what my maximum could be. That would be my guess, but I don't know. I'd love, if you're a trainer and you really think I'm wrong and you want to get in touch with me and give me some free consultation, you should. My phone number is in the show notes.
You're gonna get a bunch of angry Gumbies calling you, being like, like,
Number should we put in the show notes? That'd be hilarious. Does anyone have anyone to take revenge on?
Cedar Right. Always put Cedar Right. He'd be psyched. He'd be like, man, all these nice people have been calling me up and offering training advice. I'm so fired up.
They're like, dude, you can get stronger. You're not too old. You got this, man. This is your moment. Cedar would be like, holy shit, who is this?
Yeah. Cedar would be like, wait, so even while paragliding 6 days a week, I can still get stronger? This is perfect. Like, it's ideal.